Hi, everybody. Welcome to the premiere episode of Windows Security Monthly, and we're glad that you can come by. And this is a premiere. This is the first time out to the bat for this show. We are co-sponsored with our good friends at GFI Software. I'm Bruce Naylor. I host a show called Frugal Tech Live every Tuesday and Sunday. This show is devoted to you folks out there that want to make sure your networks are safe, your Windows PCs are secure. And we appreciate our good friends at GFI Software for giving us a hand in putting this thing together. This is a work in progress, first episode. We want to remind you, if you're watching on Justin.tv, come on over to live.frugalbrothers.com. That's where the live chat room that we moderate is. We have a beautiful player there with embedded chat, so come on over and check that out. Now, we've got a regular co-host, Mr. Gill Langston of GFI Software, and he's the manager. He's actually the manager of the sales engineering group there, and he loves working with IT administrators to figure out what best solutions that they need. He also he's got a very technical background. Most recently, his work with GFI Software began with supporting network security products and technical support. From there, he moved to Tier 2 support and finally technical sales. And Gil's just a great guy and likes talking tech, so he's going to talk with us. Well, let's bring him on right now. Folks, welcome Mr. Gill Langston with GFI Software.
Hey, everybody. How's it going today?
Hey, Gil, what's going on? I'm so envious of you, by the way. In Florida, warm weather, and we're Nanook of the North up here.
Well, somebody's got to do it, Bruce. We got to balance it out somewhere, and I'll soak up some sun for you.
I'll keep that in mind. Gil, let's get right to it. I want to ask you a question since you're in the sales team there, and I want to compare some notes. What is prompting people when they call to talk about problems they have? What has prompted that call? Well, in the Windows security network space, what's prompting those kind of calls? What kind of things you hear that's going on?
Sure. I mean, there can be a few reasons that somebody's going to give us a call and want to talk about security. One of the first ones is that they've been hit with some malware, some vulnerabilities been exploited in their system. They've had a major network issue, and they have had to take a lot of time to fix that issue, spend a lot of money, maybe even invest in some more resources. So they don't want it to happen again. So they want some advice and some tools that will help them stay on top of that, know what's going on in their network. Aside from that, though, too, in a lot of different industries, there are regulations that directly spell out that you have to monitor these situations. Make sure that you're on top of your Windows environment, your applications, those sort of things. Make sure that they are up to the most recent versions, and then you have to prove it. And that's one of the things with regulations that's really important, is proving that you are doing it. So it's not only the fact that they do have issues that they've experienced, but they also need to make sure they comply with regulations.
Well, that's a good point. And sometimes when I'll get calls, it's somebody that says, well, we're being, like if it's a bank or credit union, something like that, we're being audited. Or right. We've been through an audit and we failed this, and this. Right. But there's people out there, and I think small businesses and that don't believe that they have any of these kind of requirements, but they really do. Let me give you an example. What I'm talking about. If you take credit cards, for example, okay, whether you're convenience stores or gas stations, whatever, you take credit cards. In order to accept those cards, there's certain things you have to do to your network to be in compliance with what's called the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard. Right. And I think there's people that own these businesses that don't think that it applies to them, and it does.
Oh, it absolutely does. There are different levels of compliance that you're required to reach depending on whether or not you're storing all of the cardholder data or just portions of it, where that data is being stored, how it transits. But absolutely, they are required to meet these regulations, even if they're ones that aren't necessarily laws but rules such as PCI DSS that actually were agreed upon by the payment card industry to make sure that they're enforcing on these people that do take credit cards.
And there's also, and if you're a home Windows user, a lot of times I think we're pretty much protected if we have a router and some type of antivirus product, and maybe we might be also running a malware thing. We went out and looked at the free stuff and so forth, and we think we're safe.
Right. Well, not fully.
No.
Part of the protection.
Do the gun thing. I like your analogy on that.
Oh, right. Yeah, earlier we were talking. So one thing I said to Bruce is that, when I go to sleep at night, if I decided I was going to keep a shotgun under my bed for protection, it doesn't mean that I'm just going to leave the front door unlocked.
Exactly.
There are several levels that you want to protect yourself at. And that's where things like vulnerabilities in software come into play. You may be able to protect against some things, but there are people out there who spend a lot of time trying to find ways into your environment to get control of your machine through vulnerabilities.
So, like I said, what happens in my case, and folks, I resell network security software. That's how I make a living. I'll get a call that, is kind of an after the fact thing that says, well, we had, we noticed a big slowdown on our network, for example. The internet just kept running slow, but everything was fine with our ISP. Or we've had, we caught an employee trying to download data onto a CD or a DVD. So you hear all these kind of different things, but it's generally after the fact. And so I guess the theme of today's show is trying to hunt down and locate vulnerabilities on your local area network, whether you're running a large business or whether you're running a home network. There's a lot of reasons why locating these vulnerabilities is important. So, Gill, let's talk about some of the vulnerabilities that we should be looking for.
Oh, sure.
When we're trying to determine to harden our networks. Maybe that's a better term to put it. We want to harden our network. What should we be looking for?
Well, you hit one of the nails on the head there. A network that's slow, strange network activity, things that are going on, connections being made in your environment that you didn't initiate. But at the same time, just strange behavior of your software sometimes. Things don't open the way that they're supposed to. Internet Explorer takes a long time to pop open and give you your little address bar. Mm-hmm. Those are all clues that you could have something going on. Like I said before, vulnerabilities come in a lot of different flavors. Malware comes in a lot of different flavors. Things that can affect your system can do a lot of different things. Sometimes they are not malicious. They're playful. Somebody just wants to see if they can get into your system and cause trouble. Mm-hmm. Network slowdowns, really. Somebody who's taken software classes or coding classes and they want to try to play around. Mm-hmm. But then there are also the more malicious ones, the ones that are trying to get access to data. Maybe they want to start tracking everything you're typing on your keyboard so that they can get passwords, bank codes, that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's somebody who wants to start redirecting your search pages, right? I mean, there's all flavors and all types, and it all does come from the ability to exploit the way software is currently set up on your system.
Mm-hmm. I think we have to look maybe firstly at what admins do on a network. And by the way, if it's a home network and you set it up and you take care of it, you're the admin of your home network.
Absolutely.
Is a thing called WSUS, W-S-U-S.
Right.
Windows Software Update Service. And many people, I think, are under the impression if I set up antivirus software on my network, I deploy that, I have WSUS set up to push out patches to the network on the Windows operating system, right. I'm good. Maybe I even got a firewall sitting there somewhere.
Right.
I'm
It's
done.
a good start.
I'm good. That's all I need, right? I mean, my network's good to go.
Well,
but it's not.
So
is
let's talk about that for
but
a
it's
second.
not,
Bruce.
is it? Okay.
Because yes, those things can assist you, right? The firewall is good protection at the front. Then you are deploying these patches, and by patches, what Bruce is talking about is these are updates to code that can help fix some of the holes that might be found in software that would allow somebody to exploit and then get control to your machine. Now, something like WSUS, which can assist with patching your Windows applications, covers part of the equation. But at the same time, you have other applications on your machine. There are a lot of one that I always talk about is your Adobe Reader, right? Everyone looks at PDFs.
Right.
One of the things about the Adobe platform is that because of its nature, right, you can open these things. It can read a lot of different types of things, and from that means also there are many ways to insert malicious code into that PDF file so that when you open it, it grabs some of the memory from your machine for a quick operation that fails. It drops that memory, but then the code in the background can take control of that. Once it does that, it has control of your machine. So really, after that point, it's really up to the imagination of whoever who's writing the code as to what they want to do to your machine. So you can certainly patch the Windows part of things, but that's just part of the story.
Well, there's vulnerabilities, all the time. Of course, a lot of people spend a lot of time looking at video on the web, for example.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Flash has been known to have multiple vulnerabilities.
Absolutely.
Okay. So that needs to be patched as well. Right. So what you want to do, then you see, WSUS is basically what we're saying, folks, is not enough.
Right.
Okay. Setting up a machine to run WSUS, it's a start, but it's not enough.
Right.
There's also a database out there called OVAL, O-V-A-L.
Right.
Okay.
That's the Open Vulnerability and Assessment Language.
Okay. So companies such as GFI, right? Your software, LANguard, for example,
right,
accesses that OVAL database.
Sure. Absolutely.
Okay. And looks for lots of other vulnerabilities that are not going to be located in the Microsoft Windows services, software update services.
Absolutely. In fact, so we use OVAL, CVE, which is Common Vulnerabilities and Exposure, Security Focus, and of course Microsoft as well. So, the point is that to get from multiple sources these different types of vulnerabilities that are known, these databases can consolidate them. People can submit their own vulnerabilities they're discovered, and then they'll be validated and then put in with an OVAL or CVE number. And something like WSUS doesn't necessarily use that. It's really just saying what patches did we release and what's missing. Okay, let's install those rather than take a look really deep down into the system and say, well, this vulnerability affects this version of the software, and here's what it can do. So let's see if those conditions are present on this machine, rather than just saying, is it missing a patch it's supposed to have?
Now, does OVAL does OVAL also look at registry entries and all that as well on your system, or is it more just the general security settings of a Windows machine?
Oh, it's really deep. Listen, a lot of these vulnerabilities, of course, they do lay out exactly the criteria or the conditions for that vulnerability, and those include certain files existing, certain registry keys existing, and not only certain registry keys existing, but certain values within those registry keys. So it is a lot more than just looking and saying, is this file present? There are a lot of conditions that you have to check to see. It's almost like executing the vulnerability without doing anything bad.
Oh, really?
Right. It's very similar to that. So you're simulating what a malicious package would do that can exploit that vulnerability without actually causing the trouble.
So when I'm decided, okay, I've had problems, or I'm facing an audit, or I've had one and I've got a bunch of stuff to take care of.
Right.
What's the best way to get started? Should I look at, the open source world first, or what should I be doing?
Bruce, open source is great because it is out there, it's shared, it's offered. But at the same time, I always joke that sometimes you got to be a little of a propeller head to easily use this and navigate them because a lot of times you do have to configure your own rules, your own setups, and that's a lot to stay on top of because
it is.
Constantly new definitions are being put out there. New vulnerabilities are being discovered. There are a lot of people that work a lot more hours than any of us do trying to find these holes in software.
Okay.
So open source is good, but really a tool that can consolidate that and show you all the machines on your system and which ones they're actually exposed to, I think is really important because as a network admin, visibility is the key. It's the time saver. Instead of chasing after problems, you're now becoming proactive and saying these are the things that we need to address. So you have a list instead of another machine broke. What happened?
Well, and I think that's one of the things that I've run into, like doing, let's say, a Lan Guard deployment. Okay, it because of using, let's say, Oval and other things like that, brings attention to vulnerabilities you may not even be aware of.
Oh, absolutely.
So
absolutely.
I think you're kind of, if I'm hearing you right, if I say, okay, I'm going to try to, do my own thing,
right.
I have to have a really good roadmap and a very thorough understanding of what exactly I need to be looking for.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
I've got to have all this time and experience and knowledge in order to root these things out, where if I'm using something like Lan Guard, that's being done for me.
Oh, absolutely. And it's consolidated in one place. And even better, right, it's updated. So you don't have to spend your time doing the research on these sites to make sure. And as you said, what if you missed one? That's all it takes.
So what type of vulnerabilities, what are the main types of vulnerabilities that I want to look for on my home network or my business network? What should I be looking for? Other than viruses, Trojans, we get that. We understand that.
Sure.
Okay. Give me some examples. Throw them out there for us.
Most vulnerabilities are exploited by some sort of remote code being executed against either an application, memory. So, different programs that are out there all operate. And now these are the same things that make programs, including Windows and all that, excellent for use in a network so they can talk to each other, right? So they're the same things that make it excellent for that, also make it exposed. You have things like remote procedure calls, the server service on your machine, which makes that available to other machines to then make calls, are some of the major things that you can exploit as someone who's trying to get into your system, because they are, in fact, doorways into your system, into your operating system. Somebody wants to steal a password. All they have to do is get access as an elevated user in your system, and they can access information like that. And then it's pretty much over once someone has your password.
Well, one thing that I have seen far too often is people setting up networks and giving the user administrative rights to the machine,
right?
To the local machine. Right. I don't know about you guys in the chat room out there or not, but more times than not, you'll log in as a user somewhere and you've got full administrative privileges to the local machine,
right?
And that's scary stuff.
It is scary stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Because one thing that does touch on an important point that I always like to say, and that if you're a network administrator, you have these operating systems to concern yourself with. You have all these programs to concern yourself with. But there is one major vulnerability that you simply can't control.
Let me guess.
And that's your users. So
yeah, I knew you were going there.
Right. So, I mean, that is something that you have to be mindful of is that you want to make it harder for someone to make a mistake or click on what seems like an innocuous link, or open an email that then makes a call that then gives somebody access to the system. At least if that user is not running as an administrator, it makes it difficult for any other access at that level to be made.
Well, how many times have you walked in on a network, Gill, and booted up a machine and the login screen is there with the user's name already there? Right,
the cached logons, the previous, yeah.
Well, we're halfway home right there.
Yeah, exactly. Now all I have to do I know the guy? What does he like to eat? What's his wife's name?
Let's try password. Well, by golly, I'm in. And as a local administrator. Awesome.
Oh, I forgot. Let's look under the keyboard, too, and see if that password is there.
Well, we're laughing, but it's true. And,
it happens.
It's one of those things where I know, money's tight for folks. I get that. But when you're really trying to secure your network, this is an investment. It's just like insurance, on your house, your car, or anything else. And you're taking that investment, you just want to make sure you get the most value for your money, right?
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
But you also got to have good reports. I mean, it's one thing to scan a network.
Right.
Okay. And by the way, give me an example, just a mile-high overview of how a scan takes place. What is the mechanics of a scan on a network?
Okay, sure. So I'm going to use the example I know best, and that's Lan Guard. So it is going to use some of the common things that you use to manage your network, your file and print sharing, access to remote registry as an administrative account. Mm-hmm. So, and what it's going to do then is go in and look at, let's say you set it up to scan your entire network. So it's going to find out which machines respond, so it knows that they're up. And then we're going to go in there and we're going to see what kind of operating system it is. We're going to be able to access the remote registry, the shares, to build kind of an inventory information about that machine. And then we're going to look at the applications that are installed. Mm-hmm. Once we know which applications are installed, we can then scan those applications using vulnerability definitions. We're going to see if those conditions are present that we talked about earlier. We're going to list those. And of course, OVAL, CVE, the CVSS scoring, they rate those. You've got your high, your medium, your low, just depending on how severe the exploit could be. And even in the low and what we call potential vulnerabilities, some of the things you mentioned, Bruce, are there as well. Like the administrator account simply existing on a machine could be a vulnerability. Mm-hmm. The last logged on user being displayed on the screen can be a vulnerability. So we're going to go through and look at all those things, list them out for you so that you can see each machine, even which operating system it is, what it's vulnerable to. And then from there, we also show what patches are missing. And Lan Guard does that, by the way, for the Windows applications, the Microsoft applications, so all your SQL Server, your Exchange, and of course your Windows OS. But it also does it for Adobe, for Java, for all 5 of the major browsers that are out there, Real Player. So a lot of even Skype, things that can be exploited and need to be brought up to the most recent version of the code where they've actually plugged the holes that vulnerability shows for. So that's really important as well, to show all those things as missing because they're vulnerabilities.
But the mechanics, not to interrupt, but and I want to remind everybody, if you're watching us on Justin.tv, please come over to live.frugalbrothers.com. That's the chat room that we moderate during the recording of the show, so please stop by there. Let's talk about just the mechanics, though. I mean, so when you install Lan Guard,
right?
Okay, you have a couple jobs to do, right? To get things ready. You probably want to have a SQL server running if you've got a substantial network.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, in
But
that
you can get
case,
the
when
free
you talk
version.
about that, when you install LANguard, it does install with an access database that can be used, 200 machines, that level.
Okay.
You have more than that, then you can either make use of an existing SQL server.
Right.
You can even use SQL Express as your backend database, which is a free database program. And when you install it, one of the things it does is ask you, do you want to use the built-in database or do you want to go to the SQL database? So if you already have one, it'll allow you to select the server, and then you get a drop down. In that case, at that point, you'll just select the server and specify credentials. LANguard will actually create the database for you on that server.
Okay, so that's out of the way. Now, do we have to push out some type of agent to the workstations then, your client PCs on the network? Is that how we're going to do that? Is using an agent and then gathering data and sending it back? Are we using WMI? Or a combination, or what?
Right. Well, currently, LANguard is what I refer to as a remote scanning tool. In other words, you install it on the server, and it does go out and use WMI, SMB information, remote registry access to do that from afar, if you will.
Okay.
Now, we are going to be releasing another version of LANguard soon that gives you the choice, actually. You could, if you want, deploy agents to your machines, or you could scan remotely, as you always have, or any combination thereof, whatever works for you.
Okay. So I've got it installed. Let's go through the process of what happens then.
Okay.
All right.
So, in other words, great, I've got a program. Now what do I do with it, right?
Well, yeah, because, I mean, I want to harden my network, and I'm going to rely on this kind of tool.
Sure.
Got it installed, filled out all the wizards. Where do I go next?
Sure. There's you start out with the scanning, where there's a button that's scan, and you're going to select your scan. Before you get going, though, the way LANguard works is that there are scanning profiles. The profile is simply saying, LANguard, here is the criteria that I want you to scan for when you're scanning machines. There are some pre-created ones like just look for missing patches, just look for missing service packs, just do a vulnerability scan, or even just tell me what's installed on the network. You can build those or customize those, build your own based on another profile. So now that you have those set aside, you go to the scan section and you start a scan. You can either choose to simply do a quick overview, is what I call it, where it does just the high security vulnerabilities and the critical missing patches. That would be like a first look in your environment to see what needs to be addressed first. You can also do custom scans where you pick any of those profiles you've created, and then so once it knows what it's scanning for, you can then either say scan my entire network, so just go out across my whole network and let me know all the machines that are there and scan them. You can also choose just a range of IPs to scan. You can also build your own list of actual machines. You can put them in a text file, save those text files somewhere where you can always reference those. So it's kind of like your grouping of computers. So you're essentially telling LANguard, now you've told it what to scan for, and then you're telling it what to scan. Two ways to do that. One is to go ahead and click Go, so that it's going to start scanning the network. By default, it does 3 at a time, and then it goes out and scans those machines and returns the results for you. Or you can schedule that scan to run later. Maybe you want it to run overnight tonight. Leave all your machines on and go ahead and scan the network. Those results are put in that database we talked about, and then you can view those by just loading the scan results and expand all the little bits of the tree and see the vulnerabilities, the missing patches, some of those potential vulnerabilities, best practice type things that they recommend, and we'll have recommendations about those as well. Here's what we think you should do in those situations. You'll see your missing patches. One thing that we didn't talk too much about, too, are other types of vulnerabilities in the system, and that's where the system information part comes into play because, let's say, for instance, somebody comes into your network and they plug in a USB wireless interface card. and there is a network next door that they can connect to. Well, that person can pretty much pull anything off that system and upload it to the internet, totally outside of your control.
Right.
So one of the things we do is also tell you USB devices that have been installed on the machines. So you can see those interface cards. You can even mark it as unauthorized in a profile later so that it warns you about that. What about shares, right? Your shares on a machine, those things that allow you to connect to machines and get to the file system, those could be vulnerabilities. If you're exposed out there and you have the permission set to allow everyone access, that means they don't have to authenticate. They can just connect to those shares, and that's dangerous.
It is. I want you to hold that thought. We need to take a quick break, and we'll be back with Gill, a little bit more of Windows Security Monthly, so don't go away. We'll be right back.
GFI Software provides a single source for networking, security, monitoring, and hosted IT solutions for small to medium enterprises. GFI's extensive suite of award-winning on-premise solutions includes anti-spam, email security, email archiving, endpoint antivirus, centrally managed backup, event log management, server-based faxing, network monitoring, removable device control, vulnerability scanning and patch management, and web filtering and security. GFI also offers a suite of hosted solutions including email security and continuity, frontline email defense, and monitoring and remote management. With award-winning technology, an aggressive pricing strategy, and a strong focus on the unique requirements of small to medium-sized enterprises, GFI Software can satisfy your needs on a global scale. Please visit us online at www.gfi.com.
Hey, and we're back with our co-host of the show, Gill Langston, with GFI Software. I just want to address a couple things in the chat room about Lan Guard and all that. You can get a free 5 IP license of Lan Guard. So you download the full evaluation version, and if you don't license it, it'll revert to a maximum of 5 IPs. It is exactly the same in capability and scope as the paid version. If you need any more than that, then you have to buy licenses for it. So I just want to clear that up in the chat room. So if you want a 10 IP version of Lan Guard in a contest, you got a nice deal right there. It is you're golden right there. So just I wanted to clear all that up for everybody. It's not crippleware. And if you've got a home network, you can go and download it and get it and use it for free because why? We want our listeners of our audience. GFI wants people, particularly people with home networks and a very small little business to protect themselves, especially in these financial times that we're going through. There's no excuse not to be aware of what's going on with your network. And we know that a tool like Lan Guard or some other security scanner, depending on your level of expertise, is going to go and find and say, okay, I found this, and this. Lan Guard puts it all together in a nice report, which is also important if you're an IT administrator and you've got bosses to deal with, right? Right, Gill? That's going to be very important. We do, don't we? I've got the queen. We've always got somebody we got to report to.
Absolutely.
But it's important, though, that you're able to say, okay, this is what we found. Now, I will say, and give me a hand here, when I first run a scan using Lan Guard, it can look really scary.
Right.
Okay, because when you hit these oval databases and some of the others, things that you would never even consider to be a vulnerability, very esoteric stuff is in there. Some of it's kind of noise, though, isn't it?
Some of it is. You're right. Depending on your requirements in your network, you may not consider something a vulnerability. Some of the things that I talk about are the low security vulnerabilities and the potential vulnerabilities. One of the things we show is that like the HTTP service is running or SMTP service is running. Mm-hmm. And what we say is if this is not a vulnerability, if this service is not supposed to be installed, this could be a vulnerability. So you should investigate. The example I give there is let's say you have an image of 2003 server that you deploy and that image happens to have SMTP service installed and set up, but you didn't mean for it to be, then at least this is a way you can be alerted to its presence. Now, if you say, no, this is not a vulnerability in my environment, you can actually use the scanning profiles I talked about to actually uncheck the box for that particular vulnerability so it stops telling you that it is a vulnerability. So there is a little bit of customization you can do along those lines. At the same time, something you mentioned before too, Bruce, is that you can use the report pack that LANguard has to run reports against these scan results and say, only show me this or only show me that. I only care about open shares or what ports are open on the machine and what services might use them. So you can get a lot more granular and custom when you're using that report pack rather than just looking at this huge list of a bunch of results that, like you said, can kind of alarm you if you don't know what you're looking at.
All right. Now, what about the here's the deal, and I've seen this with some open source stuff when people are doing some things. Remediation is kind of up to you,
right?
Okay, with some of this other stuff. One of the reasons I like LANguard is because it really does pitch in and help out, and makes that job easier. So let's talk a little bit about the remediation process. What's involved there?
Sure. Yeah, in a big way, it can certainly help out and ease that pain because let's say you've got 200 machines on your network and you find all these things missing and all these patches and you need to deploy them. Well, that can be a frustrating process. So what LANguard can do is you can set it to automatically download the needed patches from previous scans or from any scan and retain this one central repository of the patches that have been discovered to be needed. And from there, you can click on a remediate tab in the interface, and you'll see there that you can deploy your patches, your service packs, and then...
But what if I have WSIS already installed and going on my network?
Oh, sure. So there is a setting in the repository section that says, hey, go ahead and check the WSUS repository for any patches that might already be there and pull them from there first before downloading them from the internet.
Nice.
So it can actually make use of what it's already pulled down.
Okay. So it can be a either or type situation.
Sure, absolutely. You can use them in conjunction to kind of check behind what's been going on there with WSUS. You can also use it to deploy those security patches directly, LANguard. Either or, as you said. Now, if you click that remediate tab I mentioned before, you can choose which patches you wish to go ahead and deploy out to these machines. And from there, what will happen is you click Start, and it's going to copy over a small agent to the machine that's job is to go to that repository, grab the patches, and execute them. Once it's done, it then removes itself, so there's nothing left over. You can even choose whether or not you want to warn your users that this is going on, that, okay, there's an administrative action being performed. You can actually set it so that they have to click OK before it will continue. You can even say reboot the machine after you're done, or shut it down, or take no action, which means that those patches will show as installed the next time that machine is rebooted.
So we're going through that, and now is that when we're doing the when we're downloading those patches? Okay, how do I deal with my peeps out there that's got laptops? Okay, they're out in the field.
Right.
Okay. Right. They come back and they dock to the network, or they connect to the network. Will LANguard then, for example, say, okay, you're here, let's go ahead and run a scan and get you all patched up, or how would that work?
You could set a scheduled scan to run with just a laptop user's machine in it, for instance, and then have that scheduled, and there's a checkbox that says, wait for offline computers to connect to the network. So it's going to go out and look for that machine when you run the scan. If it doesn't find it, well, then it's going to wait. that scan's not going to complete. So you would want to make that separate for the laptop, right, not for your regular machines. And then when that machine does connect to the network, it will complete that scan. And one of the things I had alluded to a little bit was that during a scheduled scan, you can also have it automatically remediate the machines. In other words, if you find these patches missing, go ahead and install them.
Okay.
So
wow. All right. Okay.
You know, all at once,
okay.
rather than scanning it, looking at the results, and then deploying it or scheduling it for later. You could even just have that scan, go ahead and scan, remediate, and take action at the end.
That covers, I think, quite a bit. Now, what kind of, if I I'm sure on a very small network, I'm fine as far as the type of computer that's going to run this program.
Sure.
Let me ask you, let me backpedal for a second. Does GFI offer like a best practices guide for somebody wanting to learn how to harden a network? Or where would that material be to kind of help me along?
Well, we have a few different things, right? First,
okay.
We do make some recommendations in the manuals, which if you go to gfi.com, you'll see the product section. You can go to Lan Guard and view the manuals. But even better, we worked out something called the GFI LANguard Smart Guide.
Okay.
It's kind of a, hey, here's Lan Guard. Here's some things we think you should consider. We talk about things like the database that you talked about before, some settings, and then towards the end of this document, we also kind of give a best practices overview. Things like, it's probably best to go ahead and scan for missing service packs first, the first time you go to scan, because these service packs have a lot of the previous patches rolled into that service pack. So why not just update your service packs and then scan for your missing patches?
Okay.
That's a little more expedient and convenient there.
So, Gill, would I be better off then to say, when I'm setting up my network, and if I'm going to use a tool like Lan Guard, wouldn't I be better off to say, don't automatically update the workstations, let Lan Guard control that? Wouldn't I be better off doing that? Or
I'd say so.
Would you? Because I think that would be a better way of doing it, don't you?
Well, there are pieces of malware out there in the world whose only job is to prevent your machine from being able to connect to Windows Update, any security site.
Right.
They're going to edit your host files.
Right.
They're going to prevent you from going there.
Right.
So why not take all of that concern and guesswork, did these machines actually update, out of the picture, and use something that puts the control in your hands and lets you decide what has been scanned, what hasn't been scanned, what needs to be deployed. We even have a report that shows you the last scan for every machine that's in the database, so you'll know machines that haven't been scanned or remediated in a while and need attention. I think that's a much more cautious approach than just leaving it to an automated process that you have no visibility into.
Okay. Now, what about maybe threats I don't have, but I want to be alerted to if they were to occur? So what I'm talking about, maybe I'm concerned that somebody's going to bring in a USB flash drive, or they're going to try to install an application other than what we already have approved to run on the machines. I'm concerned about, maybe trying to access different file shares, that kind of thing. Is Lan Guard going to help me with that as well?
Well, Lan Guard is more of a snapshot into what's going on during the scan in your environment.
Okay.
So it's going to tell you what was going on at that moment. Now, it is going to tell you any devices that have been installed. But GFI actually offers a suite of security programs that do address a lot of those things. We talk about plugging in devices. We have an GFI endpoint security, which will actually allow you to set permissions based on users or groups in your environment on different machines on who's allowed to plug what in, what level of permission. Is it just read? Is it just write that they have on those devices? And that's really important, too, because that speaks a lot to vulnerabilities.
So I can go into, not to interrupt, but can I go into Lan Guard and say, scan for different types of USB devices attached to the PC?
It's going to enumerate all of those USB
Okay.
devices and network interface cards, let's say, for example. But
Okay.
you can go in, if you see one that's listed there
Uh-huh.
that has ever been installed. I don't mean what's just installed during the scan, because it tells you what's ever been installed.
Oh yeah, right. Okay.
You can mark any one of those by copying it, pasting it into a scanning profile, and marking it as an unauthorized USB device or unauthorized interface card.
Okay.
And from there, the next time you scan that machine, it's going to enumerate that as a high security vulnerability because it was found on a machine when you said it was unauthorized. Right?
Okay.
And that same goes for software. So let's say you don't want iTunes in your environment. You can mark iTunes as unauthorized.
Okay.
You can get your high security vulnerability that it is installed. And this is really cool, Bruce, is
Okay.
that you can actually go in and say, uninstall iTunes. You can do that manually, or you can have an automated scan that anytime it finds that application on a machine, get it off of there.
Get it off of there.
Absolutely.
So-
Uninstall it.
So, in other words, I can tell LANguard, hey, I found iTunes. I told you not to have it. Out it goes.
Eventually, the automated process is going to win. I think that guy's going to get tired of installing iTunes every time
Oh
he
yeah.
goes in there.
Oh yeah. You'd have this would be the guy in the break room just going to glare at you the whole time.
Or the other one pulling out their hair. I swear I
I
installed
know,
it
no, I'm not
yesterday.
crazy. I put it
I
on.
did.
That'd be great just to screw around with somebody.
You know.
No, I'm not advising that you do anything like that. People in the chat room going, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I ain't got no hair left. That's a great feature. Not, well, you got to have a little bit of fun, that's for sure. You know, Gill, we've been talking about remediating and hardening your network and some of the things to look for. And these are kind of topics that could just go on for hours and hours and hours. But what I thought, there's another topic is kind of near and dear to my heart, which is the fact that, you know, I personally believe heart and soul in a layered approach to network security.
Absolutely.
And where I can go get the best of breed applications and build it the way I want it versus, I guess what some people would consider the convenience of buying an all-in-one box. And
Right.
I just wanted to kind of have a broad discussion over that before we wrap up today.
Okay.
So I want to get your thoughts on it. I make no secret that I try to explain to people there's no secret sauce in a hardware appliance.
Oh, no.
That it's a computer running an operating system and software.
Absolutely.
Just like the computers you already have that you've paid for
Right.
that have operating systems and can run software.
Sure.
Okay.
But not to mention they're more specialized, right?
They're more specialized. Okay. And maybe they do fit in a rack or something like that. But I just see so much downshot on these things. I wanted to get your spin on it.
I mean, I don't want to just necessarily say downshot, Bruce, because I can see of a couple of reasons why you may want an appliance for one thing.
Okay.
I
maybe get a firewall.
Sure, you get a firewall.
I get that. I get that.
Some people would prefer to even have a mail filtering appliance or something along those lines, but I'm also an advocate of a software-based solution in a lot of situations because, maybe you have a smaller network.
Yeah, but isn't an appliance a software-based, isn't it?
It is an appliance. It's
It
a
is
box
an appliance.
with software
It's a
on
box
it,
with
right?
software and an operating system.
Right, exactly right. And you can also install other lightweight apps on a machine that's running one of these security apps, when you have a smaller network, and get multi-use out of it.
So I guess that begs the question then, all right. If I said, okay, Gil, I'm a small business guy. I've got a network, say 50 workstations. I got a couple servers.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to put together the kind of security that I could go home and sleep at night and not worry about data being stolen and all that, what would your approach be when you come into the office as a consultant or a VAR? Where would you start first?
Well, I would probably start with an overview using a scanning tool like Lan Guard. Data is of the environment, what shares are available, what exposure you have via either vulnerabilities or other items in the network, and set about addressing those. But then you talk about theft. When I talk about security, I do the same thing, the layered approach, right? You think of your network. There are things trying to get in at all angles. You've got things coming in through email. You've got things being brought in through thumb drives. I mean, that's how config spread, right? I mean, people plug in a thumb drive, auto run, boom. Right. You are in big trouble. You have web traffic, people clicking on links, going to sites that could give them malware. So it's all across the board. It's not just one thing. But so you think about all those ways that things can get in or out of your network. So in events management software that can look at all those events that are going on all the machines. Windows loves to throw just all kinds of events. Short of connecting to a machine and just kind of scrolling through for what's important, you need something that'll consolidate those and let you view and get alerts on that information. You need something to harden your USB ports, your serial ports, CD, DVD drives from people being able to just copy things to and from them. Mm-hmm. You need to make sure that people aren't going to websites that not only could get you viruses or malware, but also going places that waste time and at the same time could leave you legally liable for something they said while they were using your equipment on the internet. So it's more than just, scanning, patching vulnerabilities. It's the email, the web, the devices. All of those things matter. And also, you want to monitor all of these devices to make sure they're up and running. Uptime is money. That's why we have all of this equipment, is so that we can go about doing our business rather than spend time doing all these things manually. So that's where software comes into play, is that it helps you get back to the business of business instead of just the business of IT. Mm-hmm. So you got to go in and look at all of those different areas and make sure that you're protected. But the first thing that I always say you have to do is you have to come up with your own set of standards. What is important to me?
Well, exactly. And, we have to remember that, if you're working as a consultant, maybe for a company or, either IT guy, maybe, maybe you fix the machines on the shop floor and you work on the network. I mean, it can happen, right?
Oh, listen, the guy that is either the most knowledgeable about computers or at least the most willing to even step in ends up being the IT administrator.
Right. Oh, you know how to, okay, great, you're it. But the thing is, the computers are generally not what your business does.
Right.
Right? You could be doing a million things between landscaping, it could be a chain of restaurants, whatever.
Oh, yeah, they all need infrastructure.
And they need the infrastructure, and they got to protect their customers and their employees' information. You got to protect credit card information. You got to protect financial information. You've got that duty.
Absolutely.
Because it's not only the right thing to do, but it's also what's legally required of you.
Absolutely.
And vulnerability, unfortunately, Gill, I think you've seen this. I've seen this. As the economy still kind of sputters along, we see more and more and more what I call bad guys trying to break into the business of stealing information. Identity theft is at an all-time high, and it's only going to go higher.
Absolutely. And the more technology we have out there, the easier it's going to be for people to get that information from you.
What I wanted to do with today's show is people walk away with this one point, and I think you summarized it best about having the shotgun under my bed but not keep unlocking my front door.
Right.
That just because you're running antivirus software on your network and you got a firewall, that's all you need to do. You're covered. You couldn't be further from the truth because, for example, as you said, Acrobat and other third-party applications aren't maybe being updated on a routine basis.
Right.
There's other vulnerabilities you never thought of. And until you run a tool like LANguard, if you're not an expert in network security, you won't know that there was a problem until you become a victim.
That's right. And that's not a great way to exist, right? I mean, hindsight's 20/20, sure, but also a little bit of prevention goes a long way towards letting you sleep at night.
Absolutely. I got to tell you, it's just like I got a call from a little company, not a big company, but, maybe about around 50 people or so in it. And they had contracted a virus on their computer that basically, I should say they contracted a botnet.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
And guess what happened? Their Exchange server started queuing up lots of email, and out it went. And unfortunately, their business runs on email.
Right.
Being able to send and receive email.
Sure.
Okay. So what happened is they got blacklisted. Their domain was put on different blacklists.
Right.
And suddenly, their customers were calling and saying, how come we're not getting an email from you?
Right. Wonder how much that cost them, right?
An unbelievable amount of money and time. And depending on, which spam list you're on, DNS blacklists you're on, it can take a lot of time and effort and paying somebody to know what they're doing to get you back, delisted.
Absolutely.
And some companies are better than others about getting that done.
Right.
There's just so much in this area that we can talk about. Any little tip? Let's talk just briefly. You got any tips about for us with SQL Server Express? Anything you might? Because again, like LANguard, you can use that to database your scan results and all that. Any little tips for maybe very small business or a home user with in regards to SQL Express?
Well, sure. And the first thing to remember is that SQL Express does have a limit on the database size, right? So 2005 is 4 gigabytes. The 2008 R2 edition has stretched that to 10 gigabytes. But there are a few things to remember when you're going to be connecting to a database like that, especially if it's on another machine. Then you want to make sure remote connections are turned on. You can install the Management Studio for SQL Express so that you can actually view what's going on there. So you want to make sure remote connections are turned on. You want to make sure that you have a user who has full access rights to that database, and then use that user in the interface there when you're connecting to it. It makes things a lot easier. But when you have the remote connections turned on, then you can run something like your report center. You can even run that on a different machine than LANguard and just point it towards the SQL server. So the remote connections are important. And also, to be able to see that database from other machines, you need to have that SQL browser service running. A lot of times that service is off, so you just go into the services, right-click, start the SQL browser service, and then you'll be able to see the databases in a drop-down whenever you select that machine.
All right. Gill, as always, since you're the co-host, normally I end the show, wrap it up by giving our guest the last word. I'm going to go ahead and give you the last word for today's episode. By the way, folks, I like to give every episode a name. What do you think we ought to call this episode?
I don't know. That's a good one.
Any suggestions in the chat room what we should name this episode? I'm kind of thinking a shotgun under the bed.
Yeah, that's actually a really good one. The shotgun approach to security.
You like that? Does everybody like that in the chat room? How about that? We name this episode a shotgun under the bed. The
Nice.
Queen is liking it. Ron says, yep, that's good. Boogit in the chat room says that's a great show.
Perfect.
Well, that's going to be the name of this episode. We will be back again next month with another edition. We're on the third Friday of the month. The show calendar is at live.frugalbrothers.com. You can go down to the bottom, and there's the calendar of upcoming shows. We're going to have the next edition of Frugal Tech Live will be on Sunday for Business Computing Weekly. Join the Queen and I for that. And then next Tuesday, we have the good folks at Market Circle. They make CRM software. They're going to be our guests on Frugal Tech Live. So for this month's edition of Windows Security Monthly, this is Bruce Naylor and my dear friend Gill Langston with GFI Software.
It's always a pleasure. I always enjoy hanging out with you, Bruce.
Somebody's got to, right? Somebody's got to do it.
Glad to.
Take care, everybody.
See ya.